I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. I would remind you that tonight's meeting is being webcast, and can members please ensure that they speak into the microphone so that they can be heard on the webcast. I would like to start with a brief announcement just to inform you and to take this opportunity to inform you that the collection at the last council meeting, the pre-Christmas council meeting for the chair's charity raised in excess of £100, and I would like to thank all those members who contributed to that collection. I'll now pass to the leader's announcements.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate it's a very cold evening. Some of you have come a long way, and we don't want to have extraordinary council meetings like this. We've had to have it because we'd hoped to have it in December with the pre-Christmas meeting, but unfortunately we weren't able to get all of that information together in time. So we appreciate it. Apologies, but thank you for coming tonight. I also wanted to thank the officers involved. Wanted to thank Helen, Nick and Stephen for all of the efforts that they've gone to, and their teams for the efforts that they've gone to in putting this report together. It's been a huge job getting all of the information and the data from different sources. So that's important that we thank them. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yep, I've received one apology for absence from Councillor Glover Ward.
Sorry, Councillor Andrews communicated an apology to me, which obviously he should have communicated directly to you, but if I can convey it to you, he's not very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, there are none. So we move on to item 5, the Hertford Theatre options. I would like to remind members that there are exempt appendices to the report this evening, and if members wish to discuss these, then the meeting will need to move into part 2 with the removal of the press and public. I hope to have as much of the meeting as possible in part 1 if we can, but I invite the Executive Member for Wellbeing, Councillor Sarah Hopewell, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the redevelopment of Hertford Theatre was proposed in 2018 and works began in spring 2022 with a budget agreed of 24 million. The project aimed to create a fantastic facility for East Herts, offering huge opportunities for arts, culture and entertainment, along with full accessibility and a varied, engaging programme of outreach work. It also aimed to move Hertford Theatre from losing £100,000 a year to becoming self-sustaining and revenue generating. Unfortunately, the timing of the agreed contract for Hertford Theatre happened just as major price shocks were heading our way. Energy costs have had a major impact across all areas of supply chains. The slight uptick in energy costs from late 2021 had only just started to feed through, but there were then rapid increases in 2022, peaking at a 59% rise in energy costs by the middle of the year. This had a huge impact on pricing. Looking across the country, Hertford Theatre was not alone in this experience. The budget for the Aviva Stadium in Manchester grew by Aviva Studios in Manchester grew by 120%. Kingston Leisure Centre budget grew by 100%. The proposed Scala Theatre in Worcester, which was subsequently cancelled, grew by 86%. That Hertford Theatre cost rose by only 30% is due to multiple changes to specifications to help keep costs from spiralling. Of course, against a backdrop of already extremely stretched finances, the recommendation to spend a further £6 million has not come lightly. We are fully aware that this is a significant sum. We explored multiple options for ways of making savings, including not opening one of the cinemas or not fitting out the studio. You will have seen further details about these in the report. Essentially, whilst each option might have made savings initially, non-completion also represents a marked loss of revenue from both ticket sales and associated food and beverage sales. This loss would mean any short-term savings benefits would quickly be lost further down the line. Efforts have been made to seek alternative funding, and there have already been some successes. Longer term, there are many other income generation options to give serious consideration to. However, as it stands, these options would take a number of months to feed through, and further delays now risk more price increases. Naturally, the question arises of whether this spend represents good value for money. With the project so close to completion, not adding the spend would leave us with a theatre that is almost built, yet earning nothing and requiring maintenance to stop degradation. We also would still need to pay back the money borrowed so far plus interest. Such a financial drain would quickly bankrupt the council. The business plan was updated in March 2023 and indicates excellent return on investment, predicated on modest visitor numbers. And if these figures prove too optimistic, we can find ways to improve performance once the theatre is fully open. Either way, an open theatre is better than a closed one. Of course, nothing can ever be certain, and we know that people have had questions about the business plan. What we know is that the consultants are highly regarded and considered industry experts. Once opened, our role as the administration will be to make sure that the theatre is as successful as possible, with the additional capital presenting the best option for achieving full opening and making a return on this vibrant and exciting asset for years to come. I propose the recommendation in the reports. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Councillor Alex Starr is seconding the report, the recommendation rather.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Okay, do you wish to speak or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right.
Okay, thank you. So we can move to debate. Do any members have any comments or questions? Councillor Hollybon.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. On page 12, first main paragraph, we're talking about 6 million worth of council assets to be sold. Have we identified what these assets are going to be to help with this? Because I personally feel uncomfortable that we're going to give permission for somebody to use 6 million. I'd like to know what the assets are. We may want to keep them, we don't know, but as a council, we should have the opportunity to be made aware of what these assets are. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crystal, if you can address that.
I can respond to that briefly. So there is a list of assets that have been identified. I think totaling potentially about 10 million. I've sent round a note to the group leads to ask that a member is nominated and we can get a reference group together of those members with Councillor Britton as the financial lead. And so there's an opportunity to discuss those and feedback to the exec. So if there are assets that are very, strongly with strong feeling that they don't want to be sold, that can be fed back. So there is an opportunity there. I think the quicker the group leads feed the names into Councillor Britton, the quicker that group can start.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. On the same subject, really, at the moment, it's a buyer's market. So £6 million of assets are being sold, probably at rock bottom prices, because nobody's buying anything at the moment. So that is my concern. Somebody answer that concern, please.
Councillor Britton.
I think obviously that, yeah, I mean, we'll have to be careful that we don't sell stuff at a ridiculously low price. At the moment, we have valuations on those assets, but those valuations are only paper valuations, and we don't actually know what they can achieve in the market. Once we've gone through the process of deciding which of those assets we can sell, we can put those out to the market and see and test the market. And it's only once we test the market that we'll actually know whether they can achieve those valuations. If they don't achieve those valuations, then we have to go and review that process. Because we've got a list of 10 million, I don't believe it will be an issue finding 6 million, because some of those they're kind of things that we've got as investments anyway. They're not necessarily assets that we've not considered selling before. So yes, and I suppose the other thing is that if it doesn't quite make the 10 million, or if it doesn't quite make that value, it will create an additional budget pressure. if we choose to sell them at slightly below the value, but it won't necessarily change the impact on the theatre plan.
Okay, Councillor Deafley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in the same vein, obviously, there's a timeline in play here. If the assets aren't sold before the monies are required, I'm assuming we're going to have to borrow the money. There'll be some sort of credit line facility. Well, what are those costs going to be on top of the 6 million in terms of interest repayments?
I don't know what the exact current interest rates at the moment are, but I think the last I heard it was around about 4 to 4.5%, maybe that kind of area. So yes, there could be a cost, but the other thing is we have got short-term deposits, so we could be using short-term deposits to fund this as well. So it will depend on exactly the timing and.
Councillor Goldspink.
Thank you, Chair. It's with a very heavy heart that I support this recommendation to increase the funding for Hertford Theatre by another £6 million. I'm angry, very angry. In fact, I'm furious that the previous administration, run by the Conservatives, have left us in this terrible financial mess. They were over-ambitious in embarking on so many capital projects all at the same time. Capital projects which were largely funded by borrowing. They boasted that their budgets were balanced, but that was only achieved by borrowing. In the last 4 years, the little group of Lib Dem councillors warned that it was most unwise to have embarked on so many projects, and we've been proved to be right. I take no pleasure in this. I feel very sad, and I also feel angry. I feel sad and angry for all the residents of East Herts, and I feel especially sad and angry for the people of Bishop Stortford. They are stuck with a multi-storey car park, which many drivers find difficult to use, and an abandoned surface car park where no one is permitted to park anymore, and no prospect of their own art centre or cinema in the foreseeable future. However, I'm not a councillor for Bishop Stortford alone. I'm a councillor for the whole district, and I, and all of us, we have to face the hard facts. If there's to be any chance of Hertford Theatre making any money and bringing in any income, the work has to be completed and the theatre must be finished. Left as it is, it would still be costing us money and not providing any income. The council would not be able to begin to repay its debts. In short, we really have no choice. It is a very bitter pill to swallow, but swallow it we must. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Eric Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought this was going to be a friendly meeting. First thing I want to say is thank you to Councillor Hopeful for a very fair and objective overview of the previous situation. The uncertainty, as mentioned, is not having sight of the assets to be disposed of to offset the need to borrow. But of course, there are plans in place to assess that. As an antidote to Councillor Goldspink's feigned anger over finances, let's have a reality check, right? It was always the aim for our capital projects to make a revenue contribution to the council. The leisure centres and Hertford Theatre were being subsidised and would cost even more to maintain and keep running. I think members now realise that actually, had the investments not been made, then they could be in danger of being lost forever. We would have been having an entirely different conversation now. The leisure centres were largely self-funded and earlier in the programme, so not so affected by inflation. For Hertford Theatre, as has been mentioned, and based on my experience, both here and at County, the inflation attributed to the project is pretty much in line with other capital projects over a similar timeline. And the upgrades enable the improved facilities to increase usage and provide a positive return to the council's revenue position. This is already happening at Hartham Leisure and Grange Paddocks. When we first considered the project, we asked, what would it cost to tear down the original and start again? That figure then was £40 million. Now it would be around 60 to 65 million to build. Of course, we own the land and the auditorium and fly tower already exist. They've been improved and updated. So just like Hartham Leisure, this was absolutely the option that produced best value. Many of you would have been on the recent tours of the theatre and witnessed the enthusiasm of the officers in anticipation of completion and opening. We put a great deal of thought into these projects, and Hertford Theatre will enable a huge number of creative opportunities and flexibility in use of the various spaces dependent on the programme. And this is a regional facility. There is nothing to compare for many miles around. The catchment is huge, and of course with housing growth, the catchment will grow even more. There's already engagement with volunteers who play a great part in helping to support the facility. And placemaking is so important. You can't go for the kind of growth envisaged in the district plan without providing leisure and arts and cultural facilities and adding social value. It will also have a multiplier effect on the local economy. The leadership team would have considered this really carefully before suggesting as a potential solution. When it was a single auditorium and studio limited to managing between live performance and second release cinema, the theatre was still vibrant. And as Councillor Hopewell said, the subsidy wasn't that massive, even with its limitations. But it will have so much more to offer now with all the flexible multi-use spaces, and the 150-seat studio is essential as a part of the project and including its future viability. So looked at that way, Hertford Theatre represents amazing value, not just financial, but social value as a hub for the cultural and mental well-being of our residents. The leisure service is providing a return on the investment. This will too, and I have no doubt of that. And I don't think actually Councillor Goldspink is in full possession of all the facts around the finances. And there are things that will be coming out over the course of time, which will be further income to the council. I just want a little other section to mention. This was information I received today from a county colleague who joined a webinar from the Building Cost Information Service. The BCIS gathers information from contractors and construction professionals to assess past, present, and future trends. So they consider, in terms of inflation, that construction is now in recession when total output is measured, and that in 2024 growth will be flat, and there'll be a slow recovery expected in 2025. The indicators show that this peaked in the second quarter of 2022 with 14.5% on building costs and 10% on tender prices. This year, 2024 tender prices are expected to increase by 2% and building costs by 2.5%. Over the next 5 years, tender prices are forecast to rise by 17%. The point is, we need to do this now. We cannot delay, so there's no point leaving an empty shell. It will only cost more. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Caroline Redfern.
Thank you, Chair. From my point of view, as a Labour councillor, I've always felt that this project was very ambitious, too ambitious, and it's on record that I have never approved of this project from the start. It seemed to me, well, it was obvious to me even right back in, after the first uplift in 2023, it was obvious to me and the then councillor beside me that it was not going to stop there. We knew that it was going to go on going up because the economic prospects were looking bad at that time, but it was pressed ahead with and pressed ahead with and pressed ahead with. And I thought it was very foolish with all the other things going on. I always thought it was very foolish at that time. Yes, it was costing the council some money to run it, but not as much as it's going to cost the council now to build it. And we've got to the point now where it has to be finished. It has to be made a success of. But I think this was a really poor misjudgment on behalf of the previous administration. And I understand what a difficult position the current administration is in. I'm very disappointed that the rump of the previous administration still thinks that this is a good idea, because it isn't. It's cost our ratepayers dear. And I totally disagree with the beginning. Now I'm going to have to change my opinion and vote for it, because I see that it has got to be made a success of now. We have no choice. As Councillor Goldspink said, we have no choice but to make a success of it. But I too am angry by the wriggling out of this and the justification, because I don't think it is justified or ever was justified. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I do understand all the frustrations around the delay and the rising costs, and you know, I've felt them myself. I feel you know, my residents of my ward have also communicated those to me. It is, you know, we've wondered what was happening and how much it was all going to cost. However, I really do believe that in the end, this is going to be a benefit to the district. Theatre, film, music, the arts, they're all so important for human flourishing, for bringing people together, for the way that we understand our human experience and the way that we understand the world. There's actually a very long history of democracy and theatre going back to the ancient Greeks, you know, working together as a way of understanding the problems that there are that we face. So I think it is going to be a really positive thing for the whole district. It's also going to be an inclusive and a welcoming space, and I'm very pleased to see that the theatre has included areas such as it's joined in with the sort of network of changing places for disabled people, as well as being accessible, much more accessible than the previous theatre. So although, you know, I fully understand all of the anger around around the delays and the finances, I do think this is something that particularly, as I say, the arts help us in good times and in bad. So I think it is something that will be a huge benefit to the district.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Hart.
Thank you very much. I just to echo what Councillor Buckmaster said. I mean, the enthusiasm for the officers for this project cannot be in any way underestimated, and there's some really lovely ideas in there, particularly the idea of having the space for people with disabilities or people of groups that sometimes get marginalised and aren't so easily accommodated in large spaces, and I think they've had some approaches from groups about using that space, which is fantastic, because it offers, you know, disability groups often get marginalised. But I tell you, I just want to ask a question. I think this is for Councillor Britton, but I was looking at the figures for the anticipated income streams coming on.
Excuse me, if we're talking about that, I think that's in the appendix, so we would need to move into part
okay.
2.
In which case, can I reserve that for later? Because
Okay,
I just think it's important to get some clarity about what the business model is for this, in terms of the amount of investment the council is expected to commit to it. And it's not entirely clear, actually.
Right. Okay, so we'll if we can hold that,
Yeah,
I will come back to you under
great,
part
thanks a
2.
lot.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. If I can move to Councillor Vicky Burt.
I'd just like to say that a number of us mentioned that we did tours of the theatre last week, and I just want to say thank you. Maybe they're listening to Reese, who's the director of the theatre, and Ben, who works for EHDC. They were so passionate about the project, and I have to say, I came away thinking I can't wait until it's open. Really, they talked a lot about supporting vulnerable young people, talking about people with quite severe disabilities, mobility issues, who would be able to go into the theatre and probably take part in events that perhaps they've never been able to take part in before. And obviously the sums we're talking about are mind-boggling. We've already spent a vast amount of money, but I think we need to now come together as a district. I know in my ward, you've probably heard all about Buntingford. You know, we've got to come to a point where we can't just chop ourselves up and think, this is my little bit that I'm going to care about. I think for this particular project, we need to think it is a whole district project. It can be amazing for our district. And we are now in a position where we do have to agree to spending yet more money. But I think our job now as councillors is to have a positive attitude for our wards, for the district, and use this, what is, I really believe, is going to be an absolute superb facility to the absolute best it can be used. So, you know, yes, I agree to some extent it's a bitter pill to swallow, but I think it's going to be such a good facility. Let's really make the best of it and market it and champion it as district councillors. And thank you again to Reece and Ben.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Nichols.
In light of recent closure of the Ward Freeman Pool in Buntingford, it has been suggested by some people locally that we as local ward councillors should vote against authorising the additional funding to enable the completion of Hertford Theatre and be demanding instead that funds should be found to instead carry out the works on the swimming pool. As we know, these are now two separate issues and my views on this are very different. Having seen firsthand the effect on our community of the loss of such an important local leisure service, as well as the recent closure of our local youth club, it feels even more important that the extra funding is agreed and the theatre is able to be completed as planned. During a period of austerity such as we're experiencing at the moment, it's not the time to cancel projects so near to completion and defunding arts, culture and leisure, as we've seen from the news, is happening in other nearby local authorities. Our East Herts Council Wellbeing Action Plan clearly makes the link between the arts and culture and health and the important role they play in maintaining and improving wellbeing by reducing stress and improving mental wellbeing through creativity, bringing people together to enjoy themselves and in doing so improving their health and wellbeing, and building opportunities for engagement in the arts and culture and lifelong learning as a buffer to social isolation and cognitive decline. Not agreeing to the extra funding for the theatre would be a false economy in terms of increasing the burden of a debt to the council with no return, and also in terms of a massive missed opportunity invest in the wellbeing of residents over the long term by giving people the chance to be audience members, performers, employees, volunteers and participants in the diverse, inclusive and wide-ranging programme of artistic and cultural events that could be on offer from the completed theatre later this year.
Councillor Nem Clements.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to start recognising the work that Councillor Hopewell has done over the last, well, since it's taken position, but particularly the last few weeks. I have appreciated it. There was one line in the report that jumped out at me and that I've had community groups come and raise with me as well, and it's at the end of section 4.1. There's a note that says that it is imperative that the theatre is run as a commercial enterprise in order for the predicted profit to be realised. And I wanted to just invite the exec just to clarify that there's nothing in this report and that there's nothing being suggested to reduce the space that we're going to be making for community groups in the theatre, and just to clarify and commit that we are still planning to have space for those community groups, for those charities, and the affordable rates for those groups. So that was point one. The second point that I had was just to note that I have, in the last week, sort of reached out to Councillor Hopewell asking for further details of the business plan, without going into any numbers here, but just for asking some of the justifications behind the numbers that are there, and asking if we have any examples of similar theatres that are making similar amounts to what's being predicted here. Unfortunately, that hasn't been forthcoming, and so without that level of detail, I don't feel comfortable voting for these proposals. So that's where I'm at with this, but I would invite, on that first point about making space for the community groups.
Okay. Councillor Hopewell.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Clements. You're not alone in having picked up on that. I think as an administration, it was absolutely part of our core to make this venue as usable as possible by all by everybody really. I know, I know a key part of it is around making sure that it does kind of wash its face and pay its way. There is a sort of I guess a pricing strategy that was set out earlier in the year in May, but I mean none of these things are set in stone, and part of our role will be to be looking at that, looking how it's looking once it's opened, reviewing these, and just making sure that the offer is as fair as it can be. To your point of kind of community groups, I had a message just earlier today about some really exciting work that's happening with people at schools and colleges and running projects with people with disabilities, sort of educational needs and that side of things. I mean, it sounds like there's a really exciting program to try and bring people who would maybe be marginalised or maybe miss out on theatre experience and to make it as accessible. There was a recent £25,000 grant to do some work on the listening project with Seal School, and that's again kind of doing that outreach and that community work to make theatre, I guess, accessible as possible. As to your second point, I guess the main thought that we've had around that is that it's quite difficult to compare theatres, and even comparing previous attendance numbers to the current business plan, because it is such a different model, and I guess each theatre and each organisation has its own set of circumstances and its own offer, and I guess this one's really unique in having the studio and having the theatre and having the 3 separate boutique cinemas, so it's quite hard to kind of meaningfully compare. What I would say is that Barker Lawingham, the consultants, are considered industry experts, and they, as far as I'm aware, their projections are reasonably, on point. They were involved in the Alexandra Palace redesign, for example. They've been involved in some really big scale projects. I feel that they'd be in a better position to, I don't really know much about theatre attendance, so I guess to an extent we have to trust that the people that are industry experts know what they're talking about. But I totally understand the caution around it, and we're very aware that our role would be to work really hard to make sure that those projections are realised. I mean, one thing I would say is that they're predicated on quite low numbers, and that's didn't seem too optimistic to me. It seemed fairly reasonable, but absolutely we'll be keeping an eye on those and trying our best to make sure it matches or exceeds. Thanks.
Councillor John White.
Thank you, Chairman. The administration have agreed to sell 80% of the Bishop Stortford Old River Lane site for 2.7 million. I suppose my question would be to the executive member for financial sustainability. Could the executive member assure me that the 2.7 million from Bishop Stortford will not be used to finance the Hertford Theatre?
I don't think it truly works like that. I think that the sale of assets is one thing, and the expenditure on Hertford Theatre is another, and the two don't really link together directly. You have receipt of money and expenditure, but you don't use one bit of money to pay for another, do you? It's not the way it works. So,
okay, thank you, Councillor Marlowe.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one point to make and one question to ask. Is this it? Is this £6 million it, or are there any possibilities of any more surprises? And secondly, I note that Harlow have just announced £33 million worth of investment potentially into a new arts and cultural centre. That will absolutely eat into any potential for people from Bishop Stortford and Sawbridgeworth coming across to Hertford. They will be aggressive in the way they market, and people will go down there. The transport links are far better. Going from Stortford to Hertford is a nightmare by public transport. But getting to Harlow is very easy. And I'd like to know whether the administration are thinking about how they might work with the Harlow project to give a balanced presentation across the piece. At least that way we might be able to save something from there. Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to respond to those points? Thank you. Councillor Brett.
I can certainly respond to the first one about the 6 million. No, we can't be certain that's it, but obviously as the project nears to an end, the amount of expenditure that's still to be made gets lower and lower as time progresses. So given that from the tour that we had last week, they were saying the theatre was essentially going to be complete by May, then that's not a lot of time for prices to go up. Plus we also have the benefit of inflation currently falling, although it's still 4% or so. But hopefully that mitigates the risks of any large increases in further expenditure needed. The officers did do a thorough review at the end of last year of the expected expenditure still to be made. So we have got recent numbers on that. So I think from that point of view, yeah, you can never say never, but we should be reasonably comfortable at that amount. I don't really have any comment to make about the Harlow thing. It's interesting what you say. It's not something I've been involved in or explored.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Copley.
Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying, I mean, this is something I will be voting in favour for, not because I think it's fantastic that we have to spend another 6 million. It just seems to be the least worst option from what I've seen in terms of if we don't spend it, then there will be additional costs and actually we'll end up spending more money than that by pushing it on further. But I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that people have made about arts is obviously very important, but unfortunately the Old River Lane project that was going to be in Bishop Stortford pushing along at the same time has had to be paused because of the costs. So in some respects I do actually agree with Councillor Wiley. I know, amazing. We don't normally agree. In terms of there are some costs of having to spend the money here, which means they won't be spent elsewhere. And I do think arts are very important, and I am very disappointed personally that we won't get that spent at the moment in Bishop Stortford. Obviously, it's a pause rather than stopping. And so that does make me sad. And I'd also like to pick up on what Councillor Marlowe said in terms of the transport links. We are saying, or lots of people are saying, that this is meant to be an East Herts wide benefit, but it is very difficult to get from, say, Bishop Stortford to Hertford if you don't have a car. I mean, it really struggle with that, and I'm sure the same is for Sawbridgeworth. I mean, I grew up in Sawbridgeworth, and I'd definitely gone. I don't think I ever went to Hertford because it was so difficult when I was a teenager to go that way. I'd always head to Harlow because of the bus service. So I know obviously the county council is responsible for transport and things like that, but I would like this to be something we think about in terms of how can we make this accessible to the whole of East Herts, so that it's not just people who have direct access in terms of cars, and we are open to every kind of age group and people with disabilities, etc., being able to access what will be the only theatre project that we're building at the moment, because we've had to park the other one, and I don't want it to be a case of some people benefiting from it and not others. That would be my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Walcombe.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I promised colleagues that I would listen to the debate and come to a conclusion on the way that I would vote based on what I hear. And what I hear is that basically we are being bounced into a position tonight where either we vote for this extra money or we're looking at the bankruptcy of East Herts District Council. It's close to that. I think we're looking at a huge asset that would continue to cost us and not generate any revenue. And I think that leaves us with little choice. But I do think that, as Councillor Burt said, if anyone can make this work, Rees, who runs the theatre, has the energy and the commitment to make it work. There's all sorts of problems with the theatre. Cinemas are closing down all over the country. We've just lost the Royston Palace, Picture Palace, and yet I do think that having an art centre like this is a great enhancement to our area, which is a very wealthy area and growing. And we've seen how initiatives like the Concert Hall in Saffron Walden have become almost world-class successes. And to have a similar project here in East Herts, I think is a great credit to us. I do think, though, I share Tony Blair's comment on the O2, that governments are not the best people to run arts and entertainment projects, and that the quicker we can set up this committee process that we're looking at developing for the council and bring in people like the consultants that have been preparing the business plan on that and create a community of experts who will make sure that the business plan does work. Because I would agree with Councillor Buckmaster that there is a possibility of income generation for the council, but that is by no means certain. Arts projects are, by their nature, incredibly risky. And we could be looking at a car crash situation a few years down the road. However, the decision for tonight is inescapable that we must support this motion. And I thank Councillor Hopeful for her excellent work, along with the officers, in presenting those recommendations so clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Estel.
I agree with others who have said this is a very exciting project. And I went on the tour, and it's fantastic to see what it will become. And so I agree it has to be finished. And it will be a really important regional asset, and it will have economic and cultural benefits for the area, and because of the community focus, it will have social value, as we've heard. But I have concerns. I respect what Councillor Hopewell has set out, but I do have concerns about the figures on the business planning, and in particular on the sort of uncertainty of the projected income, and particularly the projected surplus, and the uncertainty around the sale of assets. And so the situation feels unresolved at this point. It almost feels slightly premature. Some residents are most concerned about this project sucking resources away from Bishop Stortford and Buntingford projects. I am personally concerned about the council's loss of rental income from the premature evictions and closure of Charrington's house, which represents £300,000 or £400,000 a year of income, which is lost. And some concern over the incomplete work on fundraising initiatives, such as sponsorship of seats. We've heard about Saffron Hall, that relied completely on the generosity of philanthropy. And that's something that still seems yet to be explored for this. So I share Councillor Goldspink's dismay about the management of this over the last few years. And I have concerns about the remaining business uncertainty.
Excuse me. All right. Have you finished, Councillor Estel? Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure about that. Councillor Jeffrey Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. I would, if I may, just like to follow up on Councillor Marlowe's question and Councillor Britton's answer. I understand from the paper, in fact, we have a guaranteed maximum price, which I've read to mean that that's actually a cap on any further increase in the budget. So am I correct in that thinking? The guaranteed maximum price is for GPF Lewis, but obviously that's only part of the contract. Well, that's part of the cost. There's obviously non-construction costs of about 5.8 million, which have got to be added to that, of which some of those will still be outstanding to be paid. So I think that's where the potential for increases could come. So yeah, the guarantee price is for GPF Lewis.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Britton, you wish to make a contribution?
Yeah. I hear all the kind of the disappointment from people from kind of Bishop Stortford and about perhaps the original decision and the difficulties of transport, etc. I think it's important that we take the decision tonight, which I think most people have realised, that from the point where we are right now, which is we've got an 80% built theatre and we've got to finish it. It's the only thing that makes financial sense. You know, this is a financial decision, not a decision about whether to build a Hertford theatre. So we can only really consider the costs and benefits yet to be incurred, not those already spent. I hear the point about the uncertainty. I think there's only one thing that we can be absolutely certain on in the business plan, and that's that it'll be wrong. Because you can't do something this complex and get it spot on. There's going to be issues there. We don't know what they'll be. We have to wait for it to open, and then it'll come out in the wash. And then we have to react and deal with those situations at the time. So yes, there's uncertainty, but every venture like this is full of uncertainty. That's the way of the world. It would be a boring world if it wasn't, wouldn't it? So obviously the business case is the best we can get. So yeah, I think, yeah, even though people have got issues and think it's optimistic, I think we just have to go with it. I sense this kind of disquiet and ill feeling in some of our communities, and I think we should just take a moment to consider the wider picture. You know, all over the world, there's turmoil and conflict, and people are losing their homes, their relatives, and their lives. And I think as elected representatives, we should try and offer residents perspective. Yeah, residents of East Herts are going to be possibly getting a brand new facility in their district. It will enhance many lives locally and bring financial benefits, hopefully, to the council. It's costing 30 million. It could have been a lot more. And I think complaining about the issues around it doesn't look good, particularly to people with families in Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and other troubled areas. So I think we should be thankful that we've got the opportunity to complete this project, and we should all try and push for its success, because I think it will bring benefit to all our communities.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Joseph Timon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, first I want to say, as an individual, love going out, love going to the theatre, love going to live events. And I'm sure I'm going to go and have some very good evenings at the Hertford Theatre. I did want to come back on one issue about the council will go into administration. If we say no to this tonight, if this doesn't go through, we revert to page 17, 4.4 of doing nothing, which does put the council at risk of going bust. So that is the case. It's in the papers. It's there for you all to read. But the point I really wanted to make is I think there's been some really good comments. It's been a really good debate, one of the best debates I've seen in this chamber, and some really interesting stuff said. But we have largely missed the point of the bigger picture here. And it kind of follows on from what Councillor Goldspeak said at the very beginning about some of the points the Liberal Democrats have made during the last administration. We're just talking about theatre. We can't just talk about the theatre in isolation. We're talking about the whole council finances. And I think the criticisms were of a hugely ambitious capital programme, doing lots of different things all at once, having potentially negative consequences. And that's where we've ended up. Old River Lane is paused, and the cost of this are escalating. And when we all come back into this room in a few weeks' time to look at the financial plan, we're going to see the huge savings that we've got to make. There are huge cuts. And this council is going to be making cuts to resident services that are going to deliver less services than they're getting at the moment. And we have to look at this situation as this is a problem that's been caused by the huge ambition over a number of years. And to have the debate just about the theatre really doesn't do the whole situation justice.
Well, can I ask Councillor Deering?
Well, at this stage, I'm going to be really brief. Excuse me. I would like to comment, but if we are going to go into part two, I'd just like to be sure we're going to come back into part one, because I'll make my comment when we come back into part one. That's all I really wish. And I only hear one voice suggesting that we should go into part two, actually.
So far, yes.
But I just don't want to miss the opportunity to comment. So that's.
So you want to comment when we come back into part one, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Was it a point of order on what has been said, Councillor Eric Buckmaster, or?
The microphone.
Sorry, yeah. Because I've just read that page, and really that section is all around breach of contract. And as we've heard earlier in the conversation, the previous administration was not responsible for the inflation, and actually with officers worked really hard to get to where we did. And of course, what the officers have done in that part of the report is to say that actually there could be a breach of contract. And of course, that opens up a whole new world. And therefore, yes, it would be very serious. But of course, we're here to make the correct decision. And it's the decision based on the circumstances we face. And Councillor Britton mentioned that, you know, we've just got to do the best for our residents. And there is a solution. Let's take it and not talk about the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is only if we do the wrong thing. So let's do the right thing. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I will now move, you wish to speak now? Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So, firstly, let me be a little parochial for a second. I want an arts centre in Bishop Stortford. I want this council to serve the town I've lived in for over 20 years. And of course, it stings that Hertford gets a theatre and has 6 million invested in it when Old River Lane is still not sorted out. And in case anyone's any doubt, this is not Hertford councillors running roughshod over those of us in Bishop Stortford. No Stortford councillor I know of any party is shy of standing up for our town. Without meaning this as a threat, there are more of us overall anyway. But this is about what is best for the council and the whole of the district. For a bit of context, the Conservative administration decided to fund the redevelopment of the theatre some time ago. They decided it was okay for the risks of rising costs through inflation to fall on the council and not the developer. That administration also embarked on no less than 5 capital projects at the same time, despite warnings from my group that this was imprudent and would affect the revenue budget, something that was ridiculed at the time. Yet here we are with a few million extra borrowing costs per year than in 2019, and dependent on the theatre making money to stay afloat. I do have sympathy with reservations about whether the business plan is accurate. These things are never an exact science, any more than predicting the future ever is. However, it's a professionally produced report by experts in the field, and we can adjust our prices and approach as we go forwards. It is incumbent on us to make this work. And to be blunt, there is now no alternative source of making the future budget work. This is a precarious position we are in, partly due to errors from the previous administration, but also due to the loss of funding from the national government that sees so many councils struggling, along with costs from Brexit and the Ukraine war and inflation. To revert back to Old River Lane again, Stortford residents quite rightly want to know why we aren't in a position to fund the arts centre they need and deserve. The answer is one of timing. The other capital projects are at or near completion, but thanks to many and various factors, including poor project management by the previous administration and the volume of projects embarked upon at once, we've run out of money to fund ORL for now. Hertford Theatre is being funded, as stated earlier, to make money, and we're not far on enough in the ORL project to offer a similar prospect. We are determined as a Lib Dem group to do all we can to make this project happen and make it one the public actually want and will use. To do that, the council needs to be financially solvent, so I'm certain that voting for this proposition is essential for the residents of Bishop Stortford just as much as it is for the residents of Hertford and the wider district. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any further hands under part 1, bearing in mind what Councillor Deering has said, and therefore I propose that we move into part 2. I move that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information falling within paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. Is there a seconder for that? Yeah, okay. That's fine. You only need to second it. Okay, thank you. So please can I have a show of hands to indicate whether you support the motion to exclude the press and public? So all those for. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. That is carried. And so the webcast will need to be paused, and I'm afraid the press will have to leave us for the duration that we're in part 2. Yeah, so you can still speak. Yeah, you can still speak. It's back in, isn't he? Yeah. Okay. And now, if Councillor Deering.
Thank you. It's always good to get a go with a gavel, isn't it, really? I might also say, before I make my substantive comments, that I feel sure there are perfectly good comedians in Berkhamsted, so I think we shouldn't do them down. Well, thank you very much for the debate. It's been a very good debate with one exception. I think just to start, our chief criticism of the debate is that we would say the process leading up to this evening has not been ideal. And thank you very much for acknowledging that, Ben, in your opening remarks. It is a shame that we've all had to come in for a single item meeting. We're in the budget season. It does seem this should have been part of the budget process, and it's peculiar that it isn't. And I think I'd also endorse a comment from that end of the chamber that it is somewhat peculiar that we're being asked to agree to sell assets of 6 million without being told what those assets might be. And again, I acknowledge that you've circulated a note to group leaders, but maybe that should have been in the domain of this meeting. So we do think that's peculiar. Other than that, we are unquestionably broadly supportive of the proposal. The Hertford Theatre project is a project that we initiated. We were very enthusiastic about it when we initiated it. We're quite sure it will be to the benefit of East Herts District, and we remain very positive about it. I'd like to thank very much Councillor Hopewell, as Eric has done, for your balanced comments. Thank you very much. Councillor Britton, it's been a little bit of a tour de force for you, isn't it? And we also acknowledge you're very even-handed, and we appreciate that a lot. Councillor Carter, I personally and my group completely agree with what you've said about the value of the arts, the value of the social contract that gives rise to with the community. And absolutely, it's unquestionable that this project will bring energy into East Hertfordshire. It will bring economy into East Hertfordshire. If it works as we think it will work, and we achieve the status of Saffron Walden, it will put East Hertfordshire much more on the national map than perhaps it already is. So we are very positive about this project. The one blip on the evening, of course, was Councillor Goldspink's comments. We completely disassociate ourselves with what you've said, Meoni. I'm afraid to say it strikes us as just self-serving politics. For the record, we think you said that we undertook the financing of East Hertfordshire by borrowing. That is not true. As you know perfectly well, our budgets were perfectly well balanced every year. You know perfectly well, because you were a councillor for the full 4 years of the last term, sat in 4 budget debates each year, had all the papers that you either read or didn't, that our budgets were signed off by the Section 151 officer. So in that sense, you will understand why we don't appreciate your comments. Moving back, and that's all I intend to say about your comments. Moving back to the project, if the criticism of us is that we were too ambitious, well, I think we'll take that on board. What is a council supposed to do for its residents? Just hide under a stone? Yes, we were ambitious, and actually we haven't done too badly, have we? We delivered Grange Paddocks, which now has more footfall than ever before. We delivered the Harton Leisure Centre, which has been a great success, and I noticed that a number of members opposite were happy to be photographed at when it was opened. And the Hertford Theatre will be a great success. One of the things that's very interesting about this evening, and we absolutely have no problem with this at all, indeed the reverse, is that you have acknowledged that the experts that we instructed and who gave us advice, which to us, just as it does to you, seemed reasonable. You have used exactly the same experts. They have given you advice that the revenue projections stand up, and you are content to accept those recommendations, just as we were. So any suggestion in the that goes back to the previous administration that there was something unreliable about those revenue expectations simply does not get off the ground. I'd also just, I think I've made our points. We will vote in favour of the proposal this evening, having said the obvious, which is that this will bring energy and economy to East Hertfordshire, I did just want to echo something again, I'm afraid was said at that end of the room, which is that one of the things that we like about this is the community involvement aspect. That was always very important to us. It continues to be very important to us. Locally to Hertford, we have our fantastic HDOCS, Hertford Dramatic and Operatic Society, who were regular users of the theatre. Lots of nodding over there, and it's that organisation, which is excellent, and organisations like it will really benefit from this new theatre. So we are glad that you've taken on this project. We will support you to bring this project through to a conclusion. We believe in this project. It will deliver real, tangible benefit to East Hertfordshire. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Crystal.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I think I completely recognise that there are concerns, and it's good to hear them tonight. I think the exec, we've all heard them. I think they're all very, very valid. I know many of you have been to the theatre and seen it. I think that's been really important, so that you've able to see how close it is to finishing, and that's also important. We're not asking for 6 million for a theatre that's only just begun. This is something that is pretty much finished, and so that's important. The important thing now is to look ahead and look at the really incredible benefits that it can bring, not just to this side of East Herts, but we hope to further afield in East Herts and ultimately through the budget across the whole of East Herts. We can't promise that we're going to pull in people from Bishop Stortford. And I wish we could, and we will work hard, and we know that the team at the theatre will work hard to do that. We may pull in people from Welling. It's geography. I wish we could control that as well. We've got to push the county council to get better transport connections, so it makes it easier for people in Bishop Stortford to come here and for us to go there. But ultimately, this is about investment in towns, and I think that's such an important thing. We must be investing in our towns. If we stop investing in towns, then where are any of our businesses going to be? And I know that many businesses in Hertford are really looking forward to the crowds that will be coming in to use it. I'm really looking forward to going to see plays and films and events locally, and I know many of you here will be. So please support it. I think it's really important, and I think we should come together to support that. So that's a really, really positive thing. Thank you.
Councillor Prasad Wyatt.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to build slightly on the spirit of what both Councillor Deering and Councillor Crystal said in conclusion there. And I am working slightly on the presumption this recommendation passes this evening. I think it's important to remember that as well as being here to represent our residents, we're also here to lead and be leaders in our communities. And I think for some people watching this evening, perhaps reading about some of the words that some people in the room tonight have said afterwards, might think of this project in a negative light and might think of it only as something financial. Rather than a fantastic facility, which, as Councillor Burt notes, will be for the benefit of the whole district. As Councillor Clements notes, will provide space for community groups and marginalised individuals. As Councillor Britton notes, offers hope and opportunity for all our residents, and moreover will also be an income generator. None of that is possible unless we proceed and the theatre is completed. Furthermore, if we want to attract audiences from across the district and challenge competition from others, and Councillor Marlowe noted about Harlow. If we want to draw people here rather than seeing them go elsewhere, or if we want to encourage philanthropic donations or sponsorship, as I know Councillor Estop raised, then we have to move forward. And people outside of this room, when we leave this meeting, need to hear more about what a great facility this is, and less of councillors calling it overambitious. And as Councillor Deering noted, I know that there are members in the chamber tonight who weren't a part of the previous administration, but were happy to pose for the future opportunities from the projects which arose. And I would like to see, when Hertford Theatre does open, that all of us, of all parties, are able to celebrate what a great facility that is for the benefit of all of our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Dar.
Thank you I've got the concluding remarks, I believe, on this. So thank you very much. As a resident,
Sorry, there is one more. I mean, do you want to pause there and for Councillor Butcher to speak? Yeah, if you pause there and Councillor Butcher.
So I had, all right, let's roll back. I have an extremely long history personally with my family in theatre and the arts. And I won my first theatre medal at Castle Hall at the age of 5, quite a lot of years ago, at Hertford Theatre Week. I am a strong supporter of subsidised arts. And it's therefore really with quite a heavy heart that I came here this evening, absolutely unable to support this project because of the representations that I've had from residents in Ware, which mirror a lot what I've heard about people, councillors from Bishop Stortford saying about how their residents feel about this. The people involved in the arts and in theatre in Ware are really very unhappy about this indeed. I am not at all, I'm sadly convinced that the project has to go through. The financial situation is such that that's the only option. However, after a discussion with my colleague, Councillor Hart, I would like to ask at this point, is it absolutely essential that this is voted on this evening, or is it possible that we wait for and receive background information that of the different kinds that many councillors have asked for to give us a better way to make a vote? It's a question. Thank you.
I think we're at a point where we do need to come to a vote tonight, Councillor Butcher, rather than it being deferred. But I will pass to Councillor Dar to conclude the debate.
thank you. So I want to just say does feel like a serious decision to those of us, the many of us who are new. And I know that it's a very serious decision for those of you who were on the council before and felt that you were saying as it went along that there were too many capital projects. Personally, as a resident of Hertford, though, I always found it hard to get tickets at the theatre, so I'm quite optimistic about how well it's going to do. But we make this decision, I'm not going to say lots because, well, I think it's really good that there's been a really good turnout tonight. You know, we've all been here, we've discussed it in a lot of detail, and I think that's really good for democracy that so many of us have come along to this special meeting. I also think it's good to have broken it down into a discussion about the theatre before the budget, because again, a lot of us are new, and I think residents want to know that we've really looked at it fully and analysed it. So I think that's good. So I'm just going to conclude by saying that I support this motion, the recommendation to vote for this extra money, because it's the right decision for all of the residents of Hertfordshire, of East Hart. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move to the vote, and I will read out the recommendations to the council. A, to review the potential scenarios for the completion of Hertford Theatre, approving the recommended scenario, and B, to authorise any associated additional funding, £6,095,000, to enable the completion of the theatre development as originally intended. So members, could you raise your hand to indicate whether you are in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. Those against? And any abstentions? Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I declare that recommendation has been carried. Members, that concludes tonight's business. And thank you for all attending and for all of your contributions to this debate, which I think has been a very thorough debate. And I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.